Good afternoon. My name's Alex. I'm from Berlin. And thank you very much, Jared and all the organizers, and also Maxine and John from Web Directions for having me here. It's a great privilege to be flown halfway around the world to talk about things you care about, and I'm still a bit baffled, but yes, it's amazing. Thanks very much for having me. As Jared said, I work on a project called Hoodie, which I won't be talking about, actually, because I think that as much as I adore Hoodie for how brilliant it is, and I think it's really important, but I also think that the last talk of a conference is also kind of special, and it should be about something special, and it should have a larger scope than just, one project. So, yeah, this is a talk about perspectives, and it's called Step Off This Hurtling Machine. And part one, take a step outside yourself. So, the web turned 25 not too long ago, and I think it's a good opportunity to take a look back at its history, and I don't mean the technical history, with ARPANET and CERN and everything, but the cultural history. Where does all the way we think come from in this industry and on the web? And this story starts, like many stories, start in San Francisco. In fact, it starts on the roof of that building, which is the old American Red Cross building. It's on the corner of 2nd and Mission, in the Mission District, in San Francisco, California, United States, planet Earth. And on that roof was a very surprisingly small antenna, and it talked to a machine that was hovering somewhere around about where we are, looking back down at the Earth, a NASA satellite called ATS-3. And ATS-3 had a couple of jobs, so weather experiments and communications and navigation things and all sorts of technical stuff, but it also had what you could call a cultural mission, which was the first full disk photographs of Earth. And that's what it did. It took the first full color photograph of planet Earth. And this was in 1967. And after almost 20 years of sending cameras into space, this was the first time we purposely looked back upon ourselves with a truly new perspective. And suddenly there was this image, this cultural artifact that encompassed the entirety of our species and our history. And back on Earth, that made one man very happy, and oddly enough, he lived not far away from that Red Cross building, because everything happens in San Francisco, apparently. That man was Stuart Brand. While on LSD in the 60s, he had this idea that a photograph of Earth could really, unify humanity and give a new kind of perspective to humans, basically, and broaden their consciousness. So he campaigned to have this photo taken, and he sold these buttons all over the United States, and he wrote to NASA, and he wrote to politicians in America and in Soviet Russia. He really didn't care who took the photograph as long as somebody took the photograph. And, as we saw, NASA took the photograph, and since everything they do is public domain, he could use it for basically anything. And, he used it for the first of what I call Brand's 3 big projects. And all of these 3 projects still resonate with what we do and what we are today. So, Project 1, 1968, the whole Earth catalog, access to tools, fall 1968, $5. Now, this thing was often called the Sears catalog for the counterculture. Brand and his wife Lois wanted to list everything you needed to create a new, better society in a commune somewhere in the desert. So they collected useful stuff, and basically, they made a shopping catalog. So it included books about Indian teepees and growing mushrooms, and books on organic gardening and beekeeping, and of course, books by Buckminster Fuller on domes and tensile structures, and, so far so predictable for 60s San Francisco, I think. But the catalog had more to offer, actually. So more books, first of all. So Psychological Reflections, The Human Use of Human Beings, The Ghost in the Machine, The Year 2000, The Futurist, Modern Utopia, Dune, of course it had Dune, The Green Revolution, and very interestingly, Groups Under Stress, and even more books, Human Biocomputer, Information, Cybernetics. But maybe most telling of all, in this catalog of things you would need for a commune in the desert, is that programmable calculator in the top right. That's a $4,900 programmable calculator. And in today's money, that's 35,000 Australian dollars. That's enough to buy 2 Volkswagen camper vans back in 60s California and still have a couple of $100s left over. So what kind of hippies was this for exactly? 80% of the products referenced in the catalog were books. So you had some things like boots and shovels, but mainly you had books. The tools the catalog wanted to provide access to weren't necessarily physical tools. They were mostly ideas, and big ideas at that. And when I say referenced, that's interesting because the catalog didn't actually sell anything. It was only an index for distributed objects and documents. And if that sounds familiar, well, it should be. Anyway, the catalog became very influential. It had profound, eye-opening effect on quite a lot of people, and it sold rather well too. But practically none of them managed to sustain a successful commune. Small-scale politics and groups aren't easily solved by a mail order. But lots of people didn't see the Whole Earth Catalog as a guide to escape modern society. They saw it as a techno-futurist manifesto for social reinvention, for new interdisciplinary thinking at a large scale. You'll notice in the index of the catalog, the first thing is understanding whole systems. Kind of shows you in which direction this was all meant to go. The catalog was absolutely eye-opening. It was a how things workbook for basically everything. It was DIY as the new world order. It was a Cliff's Notes to becoming a new modern Renaissance man. Massive empowerment of the individual through information and technology. Its first line was, "We are as gods, and we might as well get used to it." And that's a powerful statement, but it still resonates well in the tech world even today. When I was young, there was an amazing publication called the Whole Earth Catalog, which was one of the Bibles of my generation. It was idealistic and overflowing with neat tools and great notions. That was Steve Jobs in 2005. The catalog's legacy is marrying two seemingly completely opposed ideas: environmental conservation and technological progress. And in the 60s, you could be on one side or you could be on the other side. You could be for technological progress, industrialization, capitalism, and the man, basically. Or you could be for sustainability, environmentalism, and you'd basically be striving to go back into the wilderness. And now the catalog came along and said, no, wait. You can have unbridled technological progress without a bad conscience. It's possible now because technology will solve everything. The problem was becoming its own solution. And remember, this is 60s San Francisco. This is a time where computers were seen as a tool of government oppression, and where people went out on the streets to protest the computerization of university bureaucracy. You can see at the bottom of the punch card, it says, "Do not fold, spindle, or mutilate." And that sentence became an iconic symbol of tech anxiety in the 60s. And of course, they made buttons about it again. And now the Whole Earth Catalog was managing to reconcile all this, and it opened up technology for the counterculture, and it opened up the counterculture for technology. Now, interestingly, Xerox Palo Alto Research Center, which has everything to do with what we do today, was situated not far away from where Brand lived, actually, and made the catalog. And for the first couple of years, Park's library was exclusively stocked with books referenced in the catalog. Alan Kay worked there and invented the graphical user interface, which Steve Jobs saw there for the first time. And the rest, well, it's basically all descended from there. So on to Brand's second project, 1985, The Well. By the early 80s, the catalog was long dead, and all the communes it may have inspired as well, and fueled by enormous defense and infrastructure spending in the past half century, California had long since become the focal point of the tech industry in the world, really. Hippies were being replaced by engineers and hackers, and it was only a matter of time till Brand's ideas and their ideas collided. So a programmer friend of his, and excuse me for that being so tiny, but they've had the same logo GIF since 1985. It's really that big, I can't do anything about it. Anyway, a friend of Brand's, a man fittingly named Brilliant, suggested, let's just try again, let's have an online version of the catalog. And Brand said, no, wait. Let's have an online forum instead, but on the same topics. And this launched as a BBS in 1985, and it really took off. And it brought the remains of the 60s counterculture, people who actually lived in communes, brought it in there and brought it together with the new hackers. And thus we got The Well, the Whole Earth Electronic Link, which is a terrible acronym, but a very good name. So what was new about The Well? First of all, it was fast. It was much faster than publishing anything on paper, obviously, but at the time, that was new. Secondly, and this should sound extremely familiar, It connected Silicon Valley people in a social network of tech professionals. So what this meant, people could now switch jobs and products quickly and easily because now everyone knew what everyone else was doing. And in a way, that is the root of the startup culture. Somebody calculated back then that the average turnaround time in jobs was 100% over 2 years. So everyone changed their job every 2 years, on average, some even faster. Third thing was, it was a gift economy. It was also new. People just did stuff for each other, professionally and privately. And it was kind of an antithesis to this corporate culture. It was a village, it was like a commune. People were just, nice, helped each other out. Private life and work started merging in a new way. You now had an online persona which incorporated both your private life and your work life. And you suddenly had a new social circle that encompassed both things, where before both would have been relatively cleanly separated. And finally, it was a new way of living. It was networked, constant, communal, non-hierarchical, and merit-based. And the well is actually still around today. And its influence on our world really can't be understated. Brand's third project, the Long Now Foundation. So now it's 1996, and Brand is once again seeing that some of the things he helped kick off are kind of having adverse effects on the world. And he started thinking about that. And he says, civilization is revving itself into a pathologically short attention span. This trend might be coming from the acceleration of technology, the short horizon perspective of market-driven economics, the next election perspective of democracies, or the distractions of personal multitasking, all are on the increase. So Brand, along with a couple of others, created this Long Now Foundation to increase awareness for the problem and to foster a mindset of slower but better. And his compatriot Danny Hillis wrote, "When I was a child, people used to talk about what would happen by the year 2000. For the next 30 years, they kept talking about what was going to happen by the year 2000, and now nobody mentions the future at all. The future has been shrinking by 1 year per year for my entire life. I think it's time for us to start a long-term project that gets people thinking past the mental barrier of an ever-shortening future." So, let's see what we can do. End of part 1. I need a drink. Part 2, no future. Given everything I've just said about the catalogue, the well, and the long now, let's talk about us and our relationship to time. Our industry's technology is amazingly in flux. It changes all the time. Stuff becomes obsolete and deprecated. There's new libraries, frameworks, languages, workflows, best practices, preprocessors, testing and deployment infrastructures all the time. Stuff changes constantly. There's new stuff every day. There's so many newsletters and blogs and people to follow, so much to keep up with and so much to learn. It's more than anyone can remember, really. This is Chris Coyer's short list of resources you should be following as a web developer. Presumably, a lot of work went into making it this short. And in a way, we're always on a bleeding edge, really. It's what defines us. And it's what people pay us for, honestly. But we can't stop. You can't just get off and say, oh, well, I've learned enough. I'll just, do my thing from now on and stagnate on a high level. You can't really do that. It leaves little time for everything else, especially reflection about what you're doing. And we're proud of it. I mean, rightfully also, because we're proud of our mental flexibility, thinking as we speak, and in a way we're the masters of making it up as we go along. It's kind of what programming is in a sense. But we're so stuck in this ever-present now. And our industry's culture isn't any better. Startups, this huge focus on speed and flexibility, on being agile and lean. You can pivot your product, you can pivot your company. I mean, think about that. You can pivot your entire product if it's not working out. It's crazy. You can fail early, you can fail often, it doesn't really matter. Fuck it, ship it. Our prototypes are rapid, so we can adapt and change quickly. And in the end, there's acquisitions and sunsetting, and everything just vanishes as if nothing ever happened. And when we make mistakes, we have version control, we can roll things back. It's all totally in flux all the time. It seems, in fact, like there's little or no value in actually planning ahead, because everything might change at a moment's notice anyway, and we can change anything at a moment's notice. All that really matters is this ever-present now. And our industry's content is even worse. So Jeremy Keith, last year at Brighton's Full Frontal conference, said that that an average website is online for 100 days, 3 months. Given that, is it surprising that we're so focused on the present? Everything is ephemeral anyway. And we embrace the fleeting nature of this medium with utter conviction because everything changes all the time, forever. And we're forever accelerating and fragmenting as well. So in the beginning, content was a bit like content was in the offline world. You had websites, and you had blog posts, and then you have microblogging, then you had Twitter, now you have Snapchat, and by now, no doubt, you have something that's even quicker and shorter I'm not aware of because I'm old. I don't know. But this means something. We become what we behold, and we shape our tools, and then our tools shape us. And what have we shaped? What have we created? Constant flow. An endless stream of ephemeral content accompanied by the constant panicky fear of missing something. We're always compelled to stay on the crest of this wave again. Everything is fast. And we were caught up in microscopic implementation details and living from day to day and simply reacting to what is happening to us because so much is happening to us. And because the future is utterly ineffable. And we end up optimizing our creations' performance in milliseconds only to see them vanish into obscurity a few months later. So in a way, we take no responsibility because we have no concept of the future. Everything vanishes again anyway. We work into a void. We do take responsibility and we do care a lot about the tiny things we feel we have control over. But everything else just carries us along with it. And we say that once something's on the web, it'll stay forever, but barely anything really lasts. So our perception of time is skewed, I think. But that's only half of our perspective problem. So do you know Menlo Park in Silicon Valley? It's where all the tech people live, basically. It's near Palo Alto, it's near Mountain View, Cupertino, it's where California's tech industry is. It's where the industry is that basically dominates the web, where 70% of the residents have an advanced degree. I think we're becoming a bit like a community like that, a bit increasingly, incestuous a little, a bit detached, a bit self-referential. And I feel it's only natural, especially the self-referentiality bit. It comes with the territory. I'm willing to bet money that most software, especially open source software, was made out of the same motivation, personal need. Scratch your own itch, dog fooding, those are fixed terms in our industry for a reason. Most of what we build first and foremost for ourselves. And I'm sure Sir Tim had only the best intentions when he implemented the first web server a quarter century ago at CERN. But fundamentally, he was building a tool to solve his problems and the problems of his peers. Nowadays, when we build tools, we solve our problems and the problems of our peers. We build tools for web developers. No wonder our toolkits are growing at such ridiculous rates. That's somebody's random grunt file off GitHub. Every day we get more and more tools tailored to address increasingly specific problems, in many cases inventing those problems in the first place. And at the same time, view source, that's vanishing into the developer menu, making the web as becoming a profession. We're professionalizing this to a scary degree, I think. And for an increasing number of people, it's not going to be this thing where you easily discover on the side, where you can be self-taught and look at other people's code like I did and probably many of you. It's going to be a career choice. View source, even if it still exists, I don't think it helps beginners anymore. Those times are behind us. And in a way, yes, our work is becoming increasingly more complex and complicated, and that people expect that of us, and they pay us for it. It makes total sense that our tools and workflows keep up with that. But at the same time, we're leaving everyone else behind. I think it requires an empathic leap, a change of perspective to realize that other people have different needs than we do, and that maybe it's our job as the people with this power, that it's our responsibility, on top of our regular job, to accommodate them somehow. I think we've most certainly got an empathy problem. I'd go so far as to say it's intrinsic to this industry, partially because of how much of our work is this scratch-your-own-itch type, and we're very focused on ourselves and people like us. And partially maybe because programming has always been a bit of an introvert's activity, if I may further that cliche. I mean, we actively outsource empathy to other people. We hire product designers, graphic designers, UI and UX experts, and business consultants. We hire them to make empathic connections to other humans so we don't have to. So we can keep coding, because that's what we do. We work with tech, and tech does what we tell it to mostly, and that's a pleasant experience, and people are complicated. Anyway. At the same time, we see the people who make the empathic connections as inferior in a way. We value their work less than our own. because those are soft skills, right? And that's fine somehow in a company or product context, but in open source, it really becomes a problem. Because in open source, we project our work into a void, and most of what comes back is from people who are exactly like us. It's not really everyone's issues, is it? It's only the issues of people like us. So we're not only losing our perspective on our place in time, we're also losing our perspective on our place among other humans, I think. Part 3, Hotel California. Thinking about the future is hard. It's hard as an individual, at least for me it is, because I've completely embraced this notion that everything changes all the time forever, and that the only viable strategy for living your life is being highly adaptable. But that makes it hard to make plans. But I think thinking about the future in a group is even more complicated. And we're all in our own little circle here, but I'd suspect we'd have trouble formulating a vision of the future web that goes beyond some open source buzzwords like, free, open, secure, private, maybe decentralized, who knows. Because thinking about the future is not only hard, it's a bloody minefield. But, never actually said that. Seriously though, thinking about the future is hard. He's cropped weirdly, isn't he? Anyway. There are conceptual tools we can use, and I'd like to use one from the discipline of speculative design. So we can agree that the future is vast and unknowable, but we can narrow down our idea of how things might turn out by incrementally iterating through variants of the future that become increasingly likely. So you start with the present, and then you have this vast scope of things that are possible, basically. And you have a narrower scope of things that are plausible, and an even narrower scope of things that are probable. And then we recall Alan Kay from Park, who said, the best way to predict the future is to invent it, and therefore we have the preferable future. What kind of future do we want for ourselves? Now again, we're a diverse lot, and probably be a lot of arguments. What we can more easily do than trying to think about our own future is to hypothesize about other entities' preferable futures, other noteworthy entities on the web, like Google, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, various governments. So what kind of web would they like to have in 20 years, and how will they, as wealthy, resourceful systems that wish to ensure their own survival and prosperity, make sure they're still around? Here's a future I can see these huge entities being happy with. With a future that's more closed. I'm certain all of them will be completely fine with a more closed web, and some of them will actively pursue it. Because in their view, closed ecosystems with vendor lock-in consolidate different usage patterns into one provider and promise greater user retention. Because if you can't leave, what are you going to do? You'll stay. A future that is more invasive. Because ads are still the main way of making money on the web, services will be increasingly invasive because the more they can find out about users, the better they can target ads towards you and make more money. So the latest development is Facebook on Android, taking increasing liberties in this regard. The current version actually has full access to all of your text messages. Why would they want those? So the third aspect of their preferable futures may be something like a future that is more inaccessible and more intransparent. The more you restrict access, the more tightly you can control the experience and prevent users from leaving your service or using it in an undesirable way. It also makes monetization easier. And I think that services and devices will start making choices for you, in part because they don't trust you. Maybe that's one of the things, one of the reasons why Facebook wants to look at your text messages. Maybe they don't trust what you write in your profile, and they'd like to check for themselves. A future that's more tightly controlled. From governments to corporations, everyone is interested in more control, be it implicit or explicit. And for the tightest control, you need not only completely closed software, you also need completely closed hardware. And in that light, it's interesting to look at Facebook's Oculus acquisition. They're basically betting a non-trivial amount of money, yet ultimately insignificant in their scale, of $400 million in cash plus 1.6 million. What did I say? 400? Yeah, no. Oh God, that's a lot of money. See, I can't even read it correctly. Anyway, amazing amounts of money, 2 billion all in all. They're basically betting on virtual reality becoming the next step in content consumption technology. It's a bet that the way we moved from desktop to mobile will be moving from mobile to VR. in the future. Don't know if it's going to happen, but will that still be the web? What is going to happen, though, is that they want to make sure that they own and control the hardware, and they want to make sure it runs their software under their terms. And consider this in the light that these services are always trying to consolidate use. As many relevant usages as possible unified into one provider. You can already lead a really involved digital life using only Google products. It's convenient, and it's seamless, and it's hard to resist because it's just really well made. And at the same time, in many developing nations, Facebook has become all but synonymous with the web. There are ethnographic studies from Trinidad and Kenya that document how poorer people's web use is practically exclusive to Facebook because it lets them do everything at the same time at lower cost. Findings from our fieldwork suggest that residents similarly consolidate diverse activities into a single online platform. Now, this is from Facebook use in an informal settlement in Nairobi. And informal settlement is a euphemism for slum, also known as a place where half of humanity lives. And they're using Facebook. It's undoubtedly Facebook's strategy to become more than just a website, to become, just as Google and Amazon want to be more than a collection of services, they want to be platforms. They want to be ecosystems. Ecosystems that extend into the real world, with virtual reality and glass and the self-driving car and that magical barcode-reading wavy stick thing from Amazon that you just wave around the house and then it restocks your fridge. And glass and all of these, they're perfect examples of manifested preferable futures. They might all fail, but they show us really well what these people want. They want to completely surround you in their service and be your main or even only gateway to the virtual world, while at the same way bleeding into the physical world. And sometimes they get help from really unexpected places. Here's an Indian telco that's moving from volume-based products, where they charge you per gigabyte, to service-based products, where the cheapest thing you can get there now is just Facebook and or WhatsApp. And that's totally fine for people whose web use is already consolidated into Facebook. That's going to be their web. Done. Period. And all of these big players, these stacks, they have amazing talent, practically limitless resources, and a strong will for self-preservation. If you're still comparing Facebook to MySpace and thinking it's going to go away at some point, you're massively underestimating how aware they are of their own mortality and the lengths they will go to survive, like paying $19 billion for WhatsApp. And oddly enough, there seems to be quite a lot of optimism about this in our industry. So here's Anil Dash saying, we'll fix these things. I don't worry about that. The technology industry, like all industries, follows cycles. The pendulum is swinging back to the broad, empowering philosophies that underpinned the early social web. And I no longer believe this. These cycles aren't inherently systemic, in my view. They happen because there are people and institutions pulling the pendulum in their direction, knowingly or unknowingly. And this tug-of-war is becoming increasingly lopsided. Most used websites per country, red is Google, blue is Facebook. That's a bit depressing. This time it's different, I think. Even if you believe that the open source world can build an irresistible, decentralized, secure, and private alternative to that, or if you believe that, sharing may suddenly become uncool, or, startup funding becomes uncool, or some major regulatory action suddenly cripples these giants, there is one almost geological trend that I don't think anyone can slow or stop. And that's a trend to the consumer device. And you can call it a phone or a tablet if you like, but it's consumer because it's a one-way thing. You can only consume services, you can't create them. And while the desktop is a veritable do-anything machine and it's open and your options are basically unlimited, a tablet or a phone is still an amazingly powerful tool. I know people who basically lead their entire life off an iPad, and it works just fine for them. But it is more closed, and the form factor simply does limit what you can do with it. And this is just as true of an open Firefox phone as it is of a closed iPhone. They are designed for consumption and not production. There's no view source menu item in there, and there's no view source menu item in Google Glass, and there won't be one in Facebook's Oculus, and there won't be one in any of the increasingly dematerialized devices we use to access the network. The internet will become more pervasive but less explicit and visible. It will, to some extent, blend into the background of all we do. So if these consumer devices are a thing, then I fear that our team's shrinking. Most people starting with the web today only know this consumer side from their consumer device. There's a saying that the entire continent of Africa is practically mobile only. It's not even mobile first, it's mobile only. New web users can't really see it for what we see it as. This wondrous, malleable thing that anyone can shape. They don't know its history or its promise. If Facebook is your entire web, you're holding that pendulum to the closed side, and you can't even do anything about it because you don't know about it. The web has been split in two. A wedge has been driven into the web thoroughly and deeply. On the one hand, we have the consumer web with little black boxes and a black cloud and monolithic stack services, and it's smooth and it's slick and it's well made and it's affordable and it's easy to use. It's very compelling. And on the other, we have the professional web where we all hang out. But the wedge is still moving, and the more separate the two parts become, I think the more both will suffer. The consumer web, because it's becoming increasingly closed, consolidated, access-controlled, and gate-kept. And our side, because our side will simply continually shrink until it's only a factory to make stuff for the other half. End of part 3. This consumer web, it's closer to TV than it is to our web. Now everyone's a channel, but apart from that, it's as much a black box as a TV is. You can call it a black cloud, really. Money and time go in, entertainment comes out, and we have no idea or control what happens in between. Internal access to this box is reserved for specially educated people and the companies they work for. And just having the ability to create content for this medium doesn't make our mobile devices much more than mini televisions. Where are services and content produced and selected? Who decides what comes through and what doesn't? Access control, filtering, and censorship can and will be systemically inherent, as will surveillance. And we won't even be able to tell, because the system is closed. And if all you have to access the system is your phone, well, that's it. You can't find out more. Right now, the internet is headed towards a highly commercialized, profit-driven, opaque, and privatized domain, much like the mass media of the 1980s. Part 4, where did it all go wrong? So, we did everything right, didn't we? We, the web aficionados, the open source community, the data privacy paladins, we warned everyone repeatedly over the years. We wrote more secure, peer-reviewed alternatives. We even generously gave it all away for free. And yet, in the consumer space, open source hasn't really won. Everyone's using Facebook. What the hell? Regular people suck. Why haven't we already had the year of Linux on the desktop? I mean, it's clearly superior. Why doesn't everyone PGP their emails? You didn't really think they weren't intercepting everything, do you? You can use app.net. That'll solve all your problems. It's all right there. But no, it's not the solution. So regular people aren't the problem, right? It must be the opposite then. Open source sucks. I love open source too much to leave that up there. I'm endlessly thankful for all the time saved and abilities I've gotten through open source. It's practically exclusive to my side as a developer and a generally nerdy computer person. I think open source does a lot for many people, but it rarely touches people outside of our demographic. So, to make this more precise, open source sucks for this type of problem. For the problem of providing good alternatives to the stacks, of building an open, free, secure, private, and ideally properly decentralized web. Here's why. Lack of empathy. Again, we graciously scatter our work upon the earth, expecting the unwashed masses to flock to us, take up our half-finished and often seriously shonky tools, and make a better world with them. And at the same time, we patronize them for needing our help when they can't figure out how they work. That's wrong. We took it as self-evident and obvious that people would even want to participate in this medium instead of doing the hard work necessary to make it a welcoming and rewarding place for the rest of the world. It's just the cherry on top of this ice cream sundae of egocentricity, expecting that everyone else would care about this as deeply as we do. They don't. They have other priorities in life. Oops. I don't know what your first computing experience was. Mine was that. Yours may have been ready on a blue screen or something. In any case, if you're my age, it was probably a black prompt. And that's a system with a learning curve that very closely resembles a brick wall. So to us, though, for lack of any alternatives, that represents a great opportunity. It's lots of fiddly rubbish and pain, but we saw great opportunities. And that's not a majority opinion, especially not today. Nowadays, many people's first and only computing experience is a phone, and they love it. And you shouldn't ever fault them for it, because they're not lazy and they're not dumb. All they want is a good experience, and they want to be empowered. And that might be hard for us to understand, given our tools and our history with these super powerful tools that give us total flexibility at the price of usability. But we can deal with it because we're used to the pain, and we kind of expect everyone else to go through the same thing. But if we had had iPhones as alternatives back then, I think many of us wouldn't be here today. Second problem, believing that technology will save us all. And really, this goes all the way back to the catalog and the well. As tech people, we put a lot of faith in technology. It's been good to us. We owe it a lot. But just having something that works for us and then expecting everyone else to use it, that doesn't cut it. Aral Balkan calls it Trickle-Down Technology. So you make stuff for the elite, and you believe that it'll eventually trickle down to the masses. It's like trickle-down economics, where you make rich people richer, and you think at some point, it's going to arrive at the bottom somehow. And just like trickle-down economics, that doesn't work. So who really benefits from our openness? It's other people like us, and it's companies who employ people like us. Companies profit so much from open source, consequently they fund or maintain large parts of many of the big projects. And again, I realize that much of the basic underlying infrastructure of the web is open source, and that is obviously a benefit to everyone. But again, I'm talking about the places where people directly interact with software. In the end, none of that really helps propagate the original values of the web. You know, this is for everyone, not just for web developers, for everyone. It doesn't help fulfill this empowerment promise of the web. It makes us feel good and vaguely benevolent and helpful, yes, but none of all this really reaches people outside of our circles. And much of this tech evolved over time, often without a clear goal, mostly in reaction to other processes. It was often never proactively designed to be usable. It was made to solve a specific problem, and then people just took it and did things to it and solved other problems with it. And there's always unforeseen issues and usages. We always build in reaction to a problem, or on top of some exciting tech just for the sake of it. But rarely does any of our building truly start with a human side. And another aspect of this tech-focusedness is this idea of meritocracy. We're so tech-centered, the main aspect that matters in a person is their tech output. It doesn't matter, in a meritocracy, it doesn't matter how awful you are as a person as long as your code is good. But conversely, that means if you write good code, you can be an utter bastard to people, and most of your peers will still respect you. And that's a lousy set of values, and a great deterrent to reaching more people, and it's a huge problem. Ooh. Culture matters. It's not just what you do, it's how you do it. Third thing, hypocrisy. Do you encrypt all your emails? I don't. Have you sworn off all centralized services, deleted your Facebook, Google, and Twitter accounts? Because I haven't. I'd venture all of you use Twitter, most of you use Facebook, and most of you probably use at least 5 Google services a day. So how persuasive does that make us when we speak of the open and free web? How could we really ever convince anyone that we really believe in this secure, private, decentralized thing? Our daily behavior just confirms how important good experiences are. If even we can't resist the allure of the big stacks and the huge companies, how can we truly expect anyone else to? They empower us too, deride them as much as we will. The tools we propagate are often too inconvenient even for people like us, especially in contrast to the polished consumer stuff. So, seen from the outside, from other people's perspectives who are not part of the tech industry, what does this look like? That doesn't sound good. That sounds depressing. And it leads to a super weird schism, because on the one hand, you have this amazing, occasionally very altruistic open source idea, which is so cool, it regularly floors people when I tell non-tech people about how it works. You have this wonderful, global, results-oriented collaboration and structural agreements that benefit everyone. It's brilliant, and I'd really like to see it in other realms. On the other hand, you have a culture that is often intrinsically condescending, unempathic, and far too often straight-up misogynistic. So neither what we make nor how we are, was or is especially attractive to people outside our peer group to get their hands on directly. The culture we have is often ideologically naive, and it ranges from obtuse and unapproachable to occasionally plain hostile. And it's no wonder that no one cares. No wonder they all go to the highly polished, beautiful services. Part 5. Where do we go from here? Tragically, we're a bit late to our own party. The consumer web, in my opinion, it's a thing, and it's going to become more of a thing. That's done, and I don't see it going away. But we're still somewhat in control of the other half, professional web. And by necessity, it's going to stay open and more accessible, at least technically accessible, for longer. Culturally, though, I think it's too closed. I'd much rather we turn it to a producer web. Something that's culturally and socially accessible, welcoming, and truly open to all, of any skill level, of any language, of any gender. And that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with altruism. If we want this open web, we need to populate it with people who care about it. Otherwise, there's no point. So what can you do? I want to briefly show 2 things we do at Hoodie. So I'm going to talk about Hoodie a tiny bit. That we do to increase accessibility to the technology we make. So very quickly, if you haven't heard of it yet, Hoodie makes developing web apps easy and fast. It's like jQuery. You include a library. It gives you user authentication, data storage, sync, offline features and stuff. And in development, we have a few concepts that guide how we make things. And I'd like to share 2 of those with you. The first one is no backend. Building web apps is complex business, especially on the server side. We're dealing with a lot of technological legacies. Some are decades old, all different, all acting upon another. It's difficult to get into. It's very easy to get wrong. It's daunting, if not outright deterring to beginners. It's a huge barrier to entry. So we looked at what people wished they could do. We saw that many people want the same basic things out of web applications. They want to authenticate users, they want data sync, they want to send a couple of mails. And we thought, man, these things have been around forever. They really should be easier. What I'm trying to do is really simple. It shouldn't be hard. All computers are is just carefully organized sand. Everything is hard until somebody makes it easy. And we thought, hey, we're programmers. We have power in this realm. We can do this. We can make it easier. It's all arbitrary. It's all agreements between human beings. We can agree on new things. So we agreed on this promise. We'll let you build full-featured web apps from the client side, and you don't have to worry about the back end. So we want to give people a tool that radically lowers the barrier to entry to building web apps, making it easy to set up, quick to get going, and if you can use jQuery, you can probably build a simple web app. What we're trying to do is build good tools and make them for people who aren't us. To help us with it, we have a second guiding principle, Dream Code. That's our interface design philosophy. And by interface, we mean the API, so where humans interface with our software. So instead of looking at all the technical features our stack has and thinking about exposing them somehow, we took the opposite approach. Again, we looked at what people wished they could do. What's the best and simplest possible way to, for example, sign up a new user? How far can you abstract this? How simple can you make it? Why can't we just do this? Account, sign up, you pass a username and a password. You should be done, right? It's 2014, and this is such a fundamental task to everything you want to do in the web. Why is it still hard? Why is it not that simple? So we made it that simple. And the implementation may be difficult or it may be easy. It doesn't matter for the person who uses it. What matters is the experience of using that. And so that is a thing. That works. And you can do that immediately. There's no backend setup. There's no database schema. You create a new Hoodie app and you go. So what it is, in essence, is user-centered design applied to code and not to visual interfaces, coupled with a bit of our own preferable features. Because everything is hard until someone makes it easy. Build good tools for people who aren't you. And remember that technology isn't enough. If we want to change the web itself, to build this free, open, secure, private, and decentralized web, we can either resign ourselves to doing it in our own realm, the pro web, or we can take on the consumer web and try to compete with the giants, with Facebook, with Google and Apple. But we can't win on the features that are important to us. In fact, it may well be useful to hide the things we value most, like peer-to-peer encryption, decentralized infrastructure, etc. Because that recent history has shown nobody cares enough. Not even we do. We care about the principles, but we don't want to make the sacrifice. We don't want to sacrifice convenience for security. I mean, even now, there are still people who make excuses because they're too lazy to use seatbelts. It's the same phenomenon. We have to win through good experience. The tools and services we make have to beat what currently exists on user experience and convenience. And all the utopian ideals we want to impose on the web, freedom, openness, security, decentralization, they must be Trojan horses because they're not selling points to the average people. And to many of us, they aren't either. And I think we should provide an upgrade path for people to move from the consumer web to the pro web. So if we can find ways of making the workings somewhat accessible under our beautiful veneer of sensible defaults and excellent user experience, then so much the better. If we can invite them over, that's a good thing. Because hardware of all types has become more accessible to more people compared to, say, the 70s. Producer hardware, like a proper PC, just the rates of those existing in the world, they just haven't increased at the same rate as mobile, but it's more than they used to be. So right now, today, we can't see the thing at all that's going to be the most important 100 years from now, or even 10 years from now. But whatever that thing is, people will have to think it. And we can, right now, today, prepare powerful ways of thinking for these people. We can build the tools that make it possible to think the thing. And I see this as our job, because we have the power to do it. And with power comes responsibility in this case, because who else is going to do it, and when else is it going to be done, if not now? It's our responsibility. We are the people who are setting the earliest patterns for this medium. Our fate won't matter much, but the norms we set will. And I don't mean technical norms, neither does he. We've seen how fleeting they can be. But currently there's a vacuum of cultural norms in our industry and the web. Apart from this Californian ideology, we have little to offer. And we can and must do better than that. End of part 5. Take a step outside yourself. To close, let's look back at that satellite picture. It was the first of 3 photographs that deeply influenced humanity's consciousness. For the first time, there was a cultural artifact that allowed us to see at first glance our place as part of a natural system. We were no longer the pinnacle of creation, standing above and separate from the rest of nature. Now, we're hardly even visible from space. We were nature, we were planet, inseparably intertwined. The photographs helped coalesce an environmental philosophy, the green movement, ecological consciousness, sustainability. They helped us understand ourselves as part of the whole system in an easily graspable way. Today, we're similarly entwined with our networks and the web as we are with nature. Clearly, they're not as crucial as the plants that provide our oxygen, but the networks are becoming increasingly prevalent, spanning the globe, bringing formerly dumb objects to life, augmenting our individual bodies and our collective, increasingly cybernetic humanity. They've become our nervous system, our externalized memory, and it will only ever grow denser, connecting more people and more things. The network is the ultimate human tool, and it will in time become utterly inseparable from us. We'll take it with us when we eventually leave other planets, and when it will outlast many of the companies, countries, religions, and philosophies we know today. The network is never going away again. It will be with us in some form or other until the very end. It will recede from view as a technical entity, but it will remain there as the invisible backbone of human society and culture. What I wish for, in a way, is a cultural artifact that will easily convey this notion today, that will capture the beauty and the staggering opportunity of this human creation, that will make abundantly clear just how intertwined our fates are, to make clear that it's worth preserving and improving and cherishing. It's one of the few truly global, species-encompassing accomplishments that has the power to do so much for so many, even if they never have the power to contribute to it directly. But to get there, we must not only build great tools, we must build a great culture. We will have achieved nothing if our tools are free, open, secure, private, and decentralized, if there is no culture to embrace and support these values. So, I implore you, make good decisions now, step off this hurtling machine. Thank you very much.